Okay. Oh shit. I'm at Nandi's house and this was a little bit shaken on the ride, so hopefully it didn't explode.
I think it should be fine though. Okay, how'd you do?
Okay. Oh god, I'm so nervous. It's coming, it's coming. That's what she said. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Okay, are we in the frame?
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Salud.
This is
That's really good.
What's up, travelers? Thank you for taking the interest and time to click on this video. My name is Sade. I'm an American expat that has been living overseas since 2018. After deciding to quit my full-time job in my hometown of Miami, Florida, I flew over 7,500 miles to the small island nation of Bahrain to join my husband who serves in the U.S. military and was at the time stationed at our naval base in the capital city of Manama. I spent just under 2 years living in Bahrain while also traveling to dozens of countries from the Middle East to Europe and all throughout Southeast Asia. Fast forward to present day, we've since left Bahrain to a new post in the mystical, chaotic country of India. Shortly after arriving though, the country went into a complete and total shutdown due to the rise and ongoing pandemic of the COVID-19 virus. However unfortunate 2020 has turned out to be, I'm lucky that during these past 8 months while on lockdown in India, I've had the pleasure to cross paths with a new and local friend who I'll introduce in this video.
I'm really excited about this video and it's going to be a little bit different because I asked my good friend Nandi, who I've known for a few months now. She lives here in Delhi. She's originally from India, but raised in Zambia, right?
Yeah.
Since you were 2?
2 months. Like,
2 months, oh yeah.
I was there for like 16 years, yeah.
But you've been here in India or back in India?
Like 12 years.
12 years. So I wanted to bring her in and just have like a fun conversation because a lot of the times when we're living overseas, especially as expats, we tend to live in our own little bubbles. And so I think the wonderful part of meeting people like Nandi and her being so welcoming and open to kind of share her culture, her traditions, and her life with people like me who are not from here is that I get more of an in-depth and different experience than I normally would have had I just been hanging out with like other fellow foreigners. I wanted to do a video kind of on the differences of living and some of the funnier and the more serious stereotypes between Americans and India to give you guys a more in-depth perspective on some of the myths and some of the crappy, like negative stereotypes and some of the ones that actually might have a little bit of truth to it. And I thought Nandi would be a great person because she's very open and honest and knowledgeable in these things. So thank you so much.
No, I'm glad to be a part of this.
And if you haven't checked out my last video, Nandi actually went to Agra with me. So be sure to check that video out on this link right up here. That was a fun trip, right?
Yeah.
It was her and I.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah.
And it's a different perspective because, or a different experience I should say, because the country is still very much locked down to foreigners, so we had the Taj to ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. It was quite empty actually.
Yeah, we were like one of the few foreigners that were there, so be sure to check that video out. But to get into this video, and really the main purpose of this video, I wanted to go down the list of like country statistics, some of the political aspects, the differences between the US and India, and what kind of prompted me just to give you guys some background on why I wanted to do this video is because I had a friend of mine, he's a good friend, good guy, but he made a very like declarative statement to me like, I would never go to India, or like that's just not a country I'm interested in. And not to take away from his experiences with wherever he was with Indian people, but I think those kinds of blanket statements of people and generalizations of countries, because India is so diverse, right?
Yeah.
And it can be kind of damaging and just not fair.
I think you lose out on the fun. I mean, more than anything, you know, just going to a new country, you know, and like being able to explore it with an open mind, I think. Exactly, and that's one of the things I wanted to give you guys some in-depth of. If you're kind of teetering on the fence of whether or not you want to visit India or not, because this, I would say from my perspective, India is not like
a country that most people will be like, I want to plan a vacation there. This is about an experience, right? It's more of like a historical experience, a cultural experience, pushing yourself out of your comfort zones. And that's why I'm grateful to even be living here as an expat, because I get a more in-depth view of how things are. But anyways, just to kind of brief you guys on some basic country statistics. So India has a population of about 1.3 billion people. So many people. Recreation. And Delhi alone has what, like 20 million people?
Just I think you can fit like the whole state of New York.
Pretty much. Just in the city. That's like mind-blowing to me. And America, we have just around 330 million people. And that's probably what, like a few states here in Delhi combined. And to put that like into perspective, the landmass size of the US is 3 times larger than it is here in India. So the density of the population within these cities, and all that comes into play, right? With politics, economics,
sociology, culture.
Sociology. And so I just find that super fascinating, because here in Delhi, the foods are going to be different than if you travel to
for sure.
You know, southern India, even the language, cultures, everything is like slightly different. I think that's one thing that most people, at least in the US, don't realize, is because India is so diverse. You know, whatever my friend, as I mentioned before, whatever his experiences were with whomever it was, wherever he was, his bad experiences, it can be completely different, even an hour, 2-hour drive from New Delhi. So it's almost not fair to make kind of a blanket statement on what you think India is like, or what you think Indian people are like, right?
Like I mean, like Hindi is not my native language. I learned it.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Sorry, I should probably formally introduce you, because our story is pretty fucking amazing. Like,
I mean, to be fair, like I mean, I probably don't reflect the authentic sort of native Indian, and I don't mean like American Indian. I know you guys also call it native Indian.
Yes, and that is, listen, okay. They're Native Americans. They're not Indians. Let's just make that clear.
So because I did grow up, like she said, in Zambia, and I moved here in my late teens. Although, you know, I did grow up speaking my mother tongue, which is Bengali. My parents were very particular about speaking it in the house. You know?
And Bengal is a state.
Is a state. You've probably heard of Calcutta. It was the first capital of India. And you know, that was the place, that was the main port, you know, where all exports, imports, spices went via Calcutta.
Spice heaven.
And if you know about the East India Trading Company, you know, which was then ruling the entire world trade, of course, by the British, you know, they used to run everything through Calcutta to other parts of Asia as well. That was the main port of call. But and then I moved here when I was 16. So I've actually I think that way it's been very, very different experiences. So I actually only learned Hindi when I moved here. I watched Hindi movies because that's a very quintessential, I think, part of growing up when you're Indian. You know, Bollywood movies.
And you spoke Bengali in your household, right? With your parents?
There was no English in the house. No English and
no English.
So, you know, that was a very strict rule, I think, which you guys...
Latinos the same way, like, I'm Cuban, so you speak Spanish at home, you learn English at school, basically.
Exactly, you know, so, like, my mother, you know, even though summer holidays where, you know, you're supposed to be not doing any studying or whatever, but when you're Indian, right, you know, my mother used those summer holidays to teach me to read and write Bengali. Okay, so there was nothing.
Even in Zambia. Keeping your culture alive.
Like, you know, there was a Bengali community. We celebrated the festivals. We ate that food, you know, and I mean, most of my friends who I grew up with all speak Bengali, you know. So there was no free time. So
generally, it's safe to say that you guys still kept very close, like your culture, your native language, even though you grew up in Zambia.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but your experience is a little bit different from the traditional Indian woman, because you had to kind of assimilate to the way things work here, the language and everything in Delhi.
I mean, it was a culture shock. You know, even though I am Indian and I speak Bengali, it was a culture shock because I grew up dressing a certain way.
More Western, or more, you would say more traditional?
More Western. It's not to say that, you know, I didn't appreciate or didn't wear any traditional clothing, but, you know, I think it boils down to a big thing within cultures is the idea of modesty. And how modestly you dress, which is, of course, different here.
It's more conservative here, would you say? Yeah. No booty shorts when you come to India. Unless you want to get stared at.
I mean, unless you're like partying with your girlfriends and you have
like going out, like a proper night out.
So that was like a major difference. I think language-wise as well, I still had to learn a lot of colloquial language, which I wasn't aware of.
How many languages do you speak, would you say? Like proper, fluently? English, Spanish, because she does speak Spanish, which is like mind-blowing for me.
I did learn French in school, and I speak Hindi and Bengali. Hindi, although I cannot read and write, and some people in Delhi still make fun of my Hindi because I seem to get like genders wrong or something like that. I did learn some Nepali. Because of my friends actually. There's a lot of similarities between Bengali and Nepali. And again, here's another thing, like northeast Indian states, a lot of people speak Nepali.
Because you're bordering and you're basically sharing a lot of the culture with each other, right?
Again, Hindi is not the only language spoken in India, you know.
It's definitely not a homogeneous, you know, nation. Colloquially, the language varies, the culture, the religion, the food, all varies. So just like in the US, how in Florida we have our accents differently than they do in the Midwest, and then in this deep South, like you can't just generalize India. Like this is the one country that you should not generalize. Let's just put that out there. One thing I thought interesting and kind of doing some research for this video is I thought India was like full of men, but then when I dived into like the data, it's actually pretty evenly split. So in the US, we're 51%, or approximately 51% female to 49% male, and here in India it's about 48% female to about 52% male. Now, one thing that really blew my mind when we first started talking about, in the US, it's kind of a fad right now. A lot of my friends are having children, and we do like big gender reveals. Like that's the thing. Like everyone is doing gender reveals, and here in India, that's not a thing. But because why?
It's gender determination at a fetal stage is illegal. So like if you go to your gynecologist when you're getting an ultrasound, you cannot ask for the sex of your baby. I mean, that does come down to decades of, so in certain states there is infanticide or feticide of the girl child, because generally it's thought that raising a girl child is more expensive because you have to
like the dowry and stuff like that.
You have to marry them off, and you know they're more dependent. Again, I mean, girls continue to prove that wrong.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, and I think that's, that kind of feticide has sort of decreased, I would say. The government is definitely taking measures against that. But yeah, it's still illegal, and you don't know the sex of a baby until he or she is born.
That's like mind-blowing to me, but it makes sense, right? Because it's trying to like really cut off, you know, a certain cultural maybe, or even just like an economic. People feel like economically women are burdensome to a family, and just trying to really curb those misconceptions, which, you know, girls rule the world, especially here in India. Like women do everything. They really run the household.
Hindus pray to more goddesses than gods. Like, you know, that is the irony.
I know right now there's a lot of nationalism going out, I would say throughout the entire world. It's definitely happening in my country. It's taking place here in India with the current governing government. But India is the largest democracy in the world. I mean, 1.3 billion people go to the polls and they vote. And I kind of wanted to point out a little bit of the differences between the two, because like I know in the US, we live in a republic. You guys know, well I hope that you know, Americans, you know, we have an electoral college system. We have the two houses of Congress, the Senate and the lower house. Two major parties. And that pretty much dominates our entire politics, for better or for worse. But in India, it's very different.
Politically, there are many parties. Most of these parties were created based on caste, which we will get to, religion, social standing, where you're from, and obviously these parties were formed to further their causes because, you know, they obviously felt that they weren't getting a fair deal.
Do you feel like, so like we always have the issue because of the dichotomy of the way our political system is set up, but you actually have more, like you're more politically aligned with the party, whereas I always have to make concessions, right? Because we have two parties, that's pretty much all we have to choose from. Do you feel like you have a party that not perfectly fits, but somewhat fits your ideology? You still have trouble, like
it is troublesome. So ultimately, like I said, because there's so many political parties, when it comes to voting, you know, at a national level for a prime minister, again, prime minister here, even though there is a president, the prime minister is the head of state.
He's like our Trump equivalent, like literally. So alliances are formed, and there are two alliances, which is the NDA, which is what the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi is part of, formed by the majority party, the BJP, which is the most right-wing nationalist party ever. And you have the UPA, which is Congress, which is, if you know of Nehru and Indira Gandhi, and you know, these people formed that party. That has its own troubles as well. They're known to be more centrist. They got into trouble they were one of the most corrupt governments, to be honest. But I mean, you know, going by where we are right now, I think that seems a lesser evil, even though I would never vote for them. But to be fair, so there's a lot. Also, the economy is pretty mixed. Similarly to ours, we have a mixed economy. We have a mixture between private enterprise and public enterprise. We have some socialism as well, and you know, lots of capitalism. We're big capitalists in the US, similarly to India, but you know, the trades are different because here in India it's more agricultural, whereas ours is more service-based. So the issues are different, right?
I mean, I would definitely say that, you know, by and large, America is a capitalist country. Yes, I think India has been trying to play to that once liberalization happened and government entities became privatized. But there is a large socialist aspect to it, and that's just purely a result of, you know, population and income and everything. There is socialism, and that's in the preamble in the Indian Constitution. I think that also comes from a lot of India's economy is unorganized. Okay, so like she said, the agricultural setup, or if you've ever been to India, you find so many hawkers and people selling things on the street. This is not something that's accounted for in the global GDP.
Right.
These guys don't pay taxes. I mean,
they're like farmers who are just coming into town and from a cart selling fruits and vegetables or something.
So a lot of India's economy is agricultural. I mean, it's changing direction now, but it's also unorganized. So we have the organized sector and unorganized sector, of course.
What's up, guys? Real quick, jumping in at you from the future. In an effort to keep this video relatively short, I'm gonna have to close it out here. I really hope that so far you've learned something new about this incredible country that I temporarily call home. In part 2, Nandi and I continue our discussion covering topics such as the comparison in average salaries, cost of living, student tuition, healthcare, food, you name it. I don't want you guys missing out, so be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified when new content is posted to my channel. If you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, be kind. Leave a like and/or comment your thoughts below. If you've been to India, tell me about your experiences. What were your first impressions? I'd really love to hear from you. But until then, please stay safe. Always sending you guys lots of peace and love, and I'll catch you in the next one.